Good afternoon, and welcome to Rabbit Hole Roundtable Talks. This is episode 3. Episode 1 has become a ghost, but that's fine. This is the podcast where we speak on different topics and we go down rabbit holes and we never know where we're going to end up. Today, we're speaking with the eloquent Science, that's his nickname, about his background in forensic science, as well as covering other topics that have to do with STEM careers. So hopefully you guys enjoy. And Mino, how are you doing?
Hey man, good. So before we start, if you're on YouTube, hit that like, subscribe, and post notifications. If you on Twitch, if you like us, give us a sub or a follow. And one day in the future, if you're an audio only listener, thanks for tuning in. So today we have Science, good friend from back in undergrad days. And as you guys can see, I'm invisible today. Some technical difficulties on my end. But Wanted, where's my Idris Alba though?
Okay, you want Idris? I got you.
Or Will Smith?
I'll work on it. So, Science, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, I would like to say, hello to all the listeners, man. It's good to be here and go down rabbit holes with the man them, Wanted and Mino. But I myself, I'm Science. I come from a small island in the Caribbean called St. Kitts, kind of close to where these guys are from. And I've always wanted to be a scientist. Wanted to be a scientist from very early on in life, and thankfully had some good support to actually make my dream come true. So I was able to become a forensic scientist. I worked for 6 years in St. Kitts on over 700 investigations, doing a wide range of different things in the disciplines of forensic science. But what I enjoyed most about my career was being able to share science with the community and really talk to young people about careers in STEM. So I'm glad to be here with everybody. I currently live in Toronto, Canada, and still doing my little thing, trying to boost up my career in forensic science and still share science with the community. I've done over 25 talks now from Toronto to young people, especially young people who are black and persons of color, talking to them about these very lucrative careers that we can have in STEM. So glad to come here and share more of my story. Thanks a lot for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming. It's always nice to have old friends on the show and get to know where they are in life right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, Idris, you moved.
Uh-oh.
We lost Science as well.
Uh-oh.
It's just me.
Times two.
Okay, he's back.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that.
So
Man.
I kind of moved the questions around a little bit so that we can have more of a flow from forensic science first and then into STEM and then probably come back to it. So
All right, boss.
the first question that we're going to talk about is, how does a science become a real science? Like one professor in undergrad told Science, forensic science is not a real science, but it's huge now. So how do we know when a science is real?
So I'll go first.
Mhm.
So last night I did my research for once. You feel me? And I was like, at first I was just like in my head, like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like all science is real science. But then I was thinking, but then you have these flat earthers, so
Uh-oh.
and they think they're doing science, but they're actually not. So I actually looked up what science is and what the key underpinnings are.
Mhm.
And so there are 9 things that science is, or main characteristics. 1, objectivity. 2, it has to be verifiable. It has to be ethically neutral. It has to have systematic exploration, reliability, precision, accuracy, abstractness, and lastly, and I think this is the most important one, it has to have predictability, which means it can predict other things.
And I think this is the most important one.
Oh, I hear my echo.
That's me. Sorry.
So I remember back in the days, I had a discussion with somebody about science and being predictable, like being able to predict other things. I remember back in the days, I had a discussion there are a lot of examples out there of science, scientists having a theory about something and then using that theory to say, well, if this is true, then we should be able to see this from observation. And like in the times that they said this, they didn't have the technology to see the things. But later on, when they had the technology, they were able to identify those things that they predicted. And to me, that shows the value of science right there.
Nice. What do you think about that, science?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the research that that Mino did, it makes sense. You know, those things are the key characteristics that we have to look for whenever we're talking about any field of study and emphasizing that it's a science. Definitely in the field of forensic science, it's a little different because forensic science did not come out of some systematic inquiry into a particular topic. It really came out of people wanting to figure out how to solve very specific issues being who did these crimes or who was responsible for, you know, robbing this bank, who was responsible for, you know, stealing this money. These kinds of very specific things and looking at what people left behind, really. So forensic science wasn't birthed as a real science, if you know, being completely honest, because it was never really an objective study in the very beginning. In the very beginning, it was very much subjective in the way that, you know, there are these specific things that we believe the perpetrators of these crimes would have left behind. So we believe by studying these things that we're going to be able to identify the perpetrators of these actions. And, you know, that has continued for a long time, probably up to today. But with the birth of DNA analysis, you know, forensic science was really forced to change. And I would say that DNA analysis is definitely the thing that made forensic science huge. Because, you know, by studying biochemistry, humans were able to unlock the key to all life, you know, at least for human life, the Human Genome Project. Once we had actual evidence of the code for the human genome, we found that there were areas that could be used to identify individuals. And that has been big because you could do statistics with that. You know, you could do all sorts of different things. You could actually look at phenotypes now. We could look at people's DNA and try to figure out what age bracket they're in. We could look at people's DNA, try to figure out other characteristics like height, possibly even weight, you know, things like eye color, hair color. You know, we could figure out these things. And that's a very systematic inquiry that was done outside of the realm of criminal activity. So that has really changed science. In terms of knowing if forensic science is a real science, right now, there's a lot of objective study going on. And everything is all about trying to be verifiable and trying to find precision and accuracy through statistics. So that's really what's going on now, is this big crucible of trying to take something that was once very subjective and make it as objective as possible. And I think that really is the key for all real sciences. Is like, it doesn't matter how you begin, but you could delve deep right now into any science and try your best to apply all these amazing principles that we know, you know, are necessary. The ethical responsibility, the ability to be accurate, the ability to be verifiable, as in to know, you know, how often do people get it right? How often do people get it wrong? It can't just be, you know, it's 100% certainty all the time. There must be some level of understanding, you know, what is the level of uncertainty? What is the level of error? How often do errors occur? So, you know, you could do all these different studies right now on any any area that you're looking into, and that's what I believe will make it a real science.
You know, I like that you bring up predictability. I mean, not predictability, error, and being aware that there's never going to be 100% correct all the time, because I think that's one thing people don't understand about science. Most of the laymen, you know, for instance, with the COVID, with them talking about COVID and all this stuff, and they keep coming back with new information. A lot of people who are laymen took that as, oh, we can't trust them, instead of, oh, they're actually holding themselves accountable and with new information telling us what's going on. So it's interesting because I think a lot of people don't actually realize that science is not like 100% always correct all the time. It's an updating of knowledge over time and with checks and balances to make sure that that knowledge is accurate. So that's a very good point that you brought up.
I don't even know where the disconnect would come from, because when we learn about science in grade school or high school, they tell us that science is something that changes over time. Like, it's not never going to be 100% true. That's why people always repeat studies, they test evidence that was there before, because there's always something new coming about that will change the results of the experiment, unless it's like a law or something like that. So, like, I don't know where the disconnect comes from, that to growing up believing that scientists should be always 100% accurate, never make any mistakes, never change anything. And I don't know how we can bring back the idea to let people know that, hey, science is not going to be saying it's going to rain today and it always rains, because even meteorology is not 100% true. It could be 100% chance of rain today and it never rains, but it's because of the way that they do the data that they have that number of 100%. So even if they say 100%, it could still be less than as well.
Well, definitely, there's a lot of variables. There's so many variables to everything that we study. Definitely in forensic science, I look at something as simple as fingerprints. We know for a fact that we're probably never gonna find two people that have the exact same patterns of fingerprints on the exact same finger on the exact same hand, because we understand very well how fingerprints develop and how the skin develops on the human body. What we don't know is, how often are we going to get the one person who we're interested in to deposit, the pattern of their fingerprint on a particular surface on a particular day? Because there's so many things that changes. Inside your sweat, definitely on the palms of your hands, sweat comes off, and when you touch different surfaces, you're leaving behind the pattern of the skin on your hands on these different surfaces. But that depends on so many different things. What if you're not sweating? What if you're sweating and your sweat is just a little bit more water than usual? That could easily get wiped off. Sometimes in this sweat, what we look for are things like proteins, amino acids. What if you're not depositing amino acids today? Or what if the sweat that's on your hand actually came from you wiping a different part of your body that doesn't have amino acid sweat in it? Then we wouldn't be able to detect those either. So there's a lot of different variables that we have to consider. Forensic science, just thinking about fingerprints, several different things. Some people touch surfaces and then they leave smudges. Some people touch surfaces and they just pristinely lift up their hands and, really nice pattern right there. But then somebody else comes along and rubs that surface. So, what do? Some people touch surfaces more than once. So you get overlay of fingerprints. It's really, really difficult because you're not in control of all the variables. And when you start to study or do research, what you try and do is control the variables that you know about in order to see or test, hypotheses. So these things are what we do in science, and they're always going to be better studies, always will be, and there will always be more variables, and we probably will never know how many variables there are to any particular thing. Definitely for immunology, I'm looking at COVID-19. It's going to be several different variables. So I could see 1,000 years into the future, people are still studying the virus that causes COVID-19, and new information still coming to light about this time in history. So, maybe we should really be telling people that there's several different things that change and influence our results. And that's why things always change and results always change and advice changes and evidence changes in science.
Lee, you sure you're not a professor?
I just talk too much, man.
Nah, not too much. That was perfect. Go ahead, Wanted.
Oh, I was gonna say that was really good insight there. I'm really every time we do this show, I'm always glad to have a guest on, because they're always coming with their A game, and I know you would as well. So I'm really happy right now, even from the beginning, from the first question off the bat, we're already going good.
Yeah, y'all can't see me, but I nodding hard and I smiling big because I agree.
Now you look like you have a nice stern face on there, from what I could see.
You couldn't get me a picture with a smile or something. I mean, you just look good, you know, very handsome man. But come on, man.
Oh man. Now this is a serious topic, so you need to be a little bit serious, you know.
Yeah, vibe.
So the next part is a side topic is for forensic science as an art form. What are the theories, topics for growth, etc., that the field is expanding into? And you already talked about some of that. So give us a little bit more about where's the future of forensic science gonna look like.
Well, definitely, there's so many different things that forensic science is. Just to give you guys an idea, there's actually 7 main areas in forensic science. And out of these 7, some really popular ones, you look at pattern recognition, that's fingerprints, things like tire impressions, things like shoe marks. And then there's biology, DNA analysis, or wildlife forensics as well. And one of my favorite areas is chemistry or materials analysis. There's actually 2 chemistry areas. One is drugs and toxicology as well, and then there's materials analysis. But certainly, what is the key leader in forensic science right now in terms of the golden standard that we really want to see, implemented across all areas of forensic science is DNA analysis. And the issue with that is that DNA analysis didn't even come out of this culture of looking at people to identify them based on what crime, we're currently investigating. But a lot of different areas did. And one of those areas is chemistry and materials analysis. In terms of the future of forensic science, this is going to be a big area because there's always these materials that transfer between people and places. Materials like fibers from the clothes that we wear, materials here from our body, or if you do something really violent, you're looking at things like glass, things like dirt. These things transfer between places and people all the time. And one of the ways that we're going to be able to figure out what is true or who is responsible for certain crime is by looking at these very microscopic materials that transfer between places and people in order to connect people together. And one of my area of research really was all around this, looking at different materials and trying to identify what we call forensic signatures that can identify, let's say, particular locations where pollen grains would have come from, or identify particular brand manufacturers for materials like matchsticks or materials like paper, or even materials like glass or paints. So forensic science, at least in the chemistry materials analysis sense, we're going to look for forensic signatures in the future. And forensic signatures are going to be all about using different laboratory analytical techniques, like vastly different. Something as different as qualitative data that you might get from doing microscopy and describing the shape of a cross section of a fiber, and actually twinning that together with analytical or quantitative data from doing something like FTIR. No, not FTIR. Something quantitative would probably be ICP-MS on the materials of a elements inside of that actual material. And once you could twin qualitative and quantitative data together using something called multivariate statistics, which is really cool. That's a separate rabbit hole, this whole thing. But if you could twin those together, you could develop very robust forensic signatures that's going to be able to tell you, there is actual congruence, or let me see, what's a better word? Concordance between this fiber that was found at the carpet of this particular scene and this fiber that was found in the shoe of this particular individual. And once you have things like that, you might be able to do even better things, like the fibers that we found in this car seat. We don't have anybody or anything to compare them to, but we know for sure that these fibers are from Levi's 501 jeans. We know for sure that there's only one store in this particular area that sells Levi's 501 jeans. And we actually know from this fiber that these jeans actually came out in the year 2020. So it has to be somebody who has a pair of these very specific jeans, and it still might be, a few hundred people in this particular area, but immediately you limit down what you're looking for. And that's what we want to get. That's the area that we want to get to. in chemistry and materials analysis in forensic science, and being able to have good statistics that will tell us something along the lines of, well, we can say with 99% certainty that these are the type of genes that we're looking for. Or, well, it's only a small piece of the fiber. We didn't get much information from it. We only have a 50% certainty that these are the genes we're looking for. The other 50% would be this option, also 40% for this option, 30% for this option, things like that. Hopefully that's where we're going to go in the future. But there's also a lot of other exciting areas, and one of them being digital forensics. That's going to become bigger in the future because our lives are a lot more digital as well. So I'll just leave it there.
So, man, I'm gonna say this right now. So I work in epidemiology, mostly dealing with biostatistics and stuff like that. So a lot of stuff that you were saying sounded like jargon that I hear at my job, qualitative and quantitative. I think every field right now is trying to get both qualitative and quantitative data and try to marry them together, because a lot of times we focus on quantitative because, numbers, quote unquote, don't lie, or the numbers are easy to understand. But a lot of times, you could have a study saying, let's see, you could say, well, the p-value is this, so therefore I can't reject my null hypothesis, therefore this is true. But then you have to think about why it's true, and I think that's this next step where the qualitative comes in. So then you might reference, you might have a doctor colleague, because I work alongside doctors as well, or some other person in the medical field who actually working with the patients. They're not looking at the data, but they could answer the question, why is this happening? They could say, well, oh yeah, that makes sense because we see a lot of patients come in with heart murmurs. So yeah, it makes sense that you see in the data. So stuff like that is very important. And then I was wondering though, so as Black men, and this is off topic maybe, but as Black men, and with how the system is, at least in America, where people go to jail who are innocent or who are charged with things, and maybe the crime scene is modified so that they're framed potentially. How likely is it to have false positives with forensic science, and can you foresee it being used in this way that I'm describing?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have the statistics. I don't know the statistics about how frequently we have false positives across the range of different disciplines that are in forensic science. But I could definitely say that false positives have happened. They've happened for a very long time. People misinterpret the evidence as well. So these things happen. I remember reading about one case which was actually digital forensics. Somebody's computer, a gentleman, his computer was actually found to be constantly downloading child pornography. And he was always denying it, like, no, I'm not doing that, definitely not me, kind of thing. But like, all the analysts could find was like, him using all these backdoor things through the dark web to constantly download this content, which was illegal in the place that he was living. It turns out that those analysts continued to look through his computer, and they were actually able to find a Trojan that was a virus that was doing this on purpose, maliciously, on his device. Guess when they found that?
Years later.
After he was convicted of the crime.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was able to get out, and restitution that happens after persons have been wrongfully convicted, was actually paid out to him. But guess what? His life was really destroyed by that. His marriage, his profession, his relationship with other people, family, friends, like all these things jeopardized because people are malicious. And like I mentioned, with digital, with our lives becoming more digital, in the future we're gonna see more use of digital forensics. So these are the things we need to look out for. And I would just like to add that servers are crime scenes. They definitely are. So many different things, so many different crimes happen in the digital realm. And I'm not a digital guy, but just thinking about all this stuff that can possibly happen now, from identity theft, to people cooking their books for different companies. I mean, a lot of different stuff can happen. So yeah, these things happen, and it is likely, something that we have to safeguard against in the field. But definitely, the people that come before the justice system more often than not look like me and you, and in this particular age range. And that's a wider problem that we have in society, definitely in the continent of North America for sure. You know,
Yeah.
so you want to really start to pay attention, and I think people have an idea, that we need to pay attention to this issue because it doesn't make sense that black people in the U.S., for example, are around 13 or 15% of the total population of the country. In the jails, it's a much higher percentage, like probably over 70% of persons who are incarcerated in the U.S., are black or African American. So, there's definitely going to be a few of those persons who are wrongfully convicted. Some of them probably with physical evidence that was interpreted incorrectly or was a false positive
Mm.
by a forensic scientist. How can we guard against this? We definitely need to do better in our profession. Forensic scientists need to understand that there is bias. All of us will have bias, and we need to put safeguards in place to guard against that. All of us are not doing the work that we need to do at the standard that we need to do. So we need to look into, getting better standards that's going to unify forensic science practices across broad areas. Definitely for a country like Canada, that's something that we do not have up here. There are no universal standards for forensic science. So somebody who is in the city of Toronto, which is in the province of Ontario, could be doing a toxicology test, and be doing it to a different standard than somebody else who's in a neighboring province called Quebec in the city of Montreal. And these things, doing the same things just slightly differently, they don't give us any confidence in terms of how can we avoid false positives or wrongful convictions in the bigger sense. So yeah, we definitely need to see big bodies doing oversight that's going to make sure that the standards of forensic science are upheld, for everybody living in any jurisdiction. So, that's something I would like to see for the future.
That's very interesting there. I had two things to talk about, well, to say. One is that I've watched CSI Cyber, and that show talks about, you know, the way that our lives are going now to the more digital age and how crimes can happen online, and you can always trace it back if it's online for the most part. So when you mentioned that, I immediately thought about that show, and I was like, yeah, because I growing up wanted to be a forensic scientist as well as many other things. So I watched CSI, I watch CSI Miami. I watched all these shows growing up, and I tried to learn things from them, and I never really knew how true they were. But that'll come later. But the second thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the future of forensic science was either a movie or a TV show that I watched where they came to a point where you can tell if someone will commit a crime based on their DNA. And I want to ask you if that is far-fetched or if you have any insight on that at all.
Whoa. Before you answer. So that reminded me of this anime I was watching called Psychopaths.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, man, big shout outs to Psychopaths. Definitely one of the best animes. Like, really nice short series. One of the best in recent memory. I don't watch much anime now, but I love Psychopaths. But in terms of looking at people's DNA and being able to predict whether or not they would commit a crime, I think that's just foolishness. I think that's clear pseudoscience. I mean, think about how many crimes you have committed in your life. You probably don't remember committing any crimes, but have you driven over the speed limit? Have you parked your car in an area where you should not have parked? Have you ever thrown something down on the ground where you should not have littered? All of these, little infractions against the law, and some of them are actually criminal infractions. You know, so these things happen. Crime is a part of healthy societies. The aim is never going to be to eliminate crime from society. As ideal as people think that would be, it's actually not at all ideal, and it causes a lot of different issues. All of us have the same propensity to commit crime. I think that, is a pretty good statement to make, especially based on how many laws our societies have. All the laws are not going to be laws that we like, so there's going to be little things that we, try to get away with. But in terms of looking at violent crime and if people are going to be, more predisposed to committing those just based purely on DNA or their genetics, I don't like that. I don't think it's a good move for us to go that way. And the issue always becomes if you try to fight wars before they happen, it never ends up well. Never ends up well. The criminal justice system might not be perfect, but this whole idea of justice is about looking at things that have happened, trying to figure out what is true, who should be held accountable, and how they're gonna, make restitution for those actions. That's the cycle of justice. If you're trying to cut it all off and say, you will be responsible for a crime and we can't take that risk, then there's no opportunity for me to pay restitution or try to make it right. So how is that justice? So I don't like that idea at all. I don't think it's very scientific. And I really hope that people stop trying to do those things because, all of us, like I said, all of us have the same propensity to commit crime.
Look who it is.
He's looking great.
He just bought some cake soup and
Oh no, not the cake soup.
welcome, brother. All right. So Mino, do you have any questions that you want to bring up?
I'm not gonna lie. I was transferring between the new computer and the old computer, and I missed everything that was said.
Wow.
But I'm sure he dropped a bunch of insight. But I do have some questions. I have a whole list of questions over here. Y'all can't see this one, but one thing I always wondered, at least when I was growing up, I didn't have as much guidance when it came to how to get into STEM. Like back in my time, damn, I sound old, but back in my time, it was always pursue STEM, pursue STEM. That was the big push. Every Black kid was pushed to go into STEM. And obviously we need representation in the field. But one thing that was not told to me is what do I need to do to prepare myself for that field? Or what kind of things what kind of classes to take? Or what kind of skill sets will I need for myself? And I think we should probably talk on that, for future generations. If you're looking to get into STEM, but we should also define what STEM is, because I don't know if everybody know what the initialisms or the acronym means. So we probably should define that, but we need to also talk about how to get into it, what kind of skill sets they might need and stuff like that.
Okay. I'll let the guest.
Yeah, man. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So it's STEM, as you can see behind wanted there. Yeah, that's right. So it's all about being able to use these very particular and related skill sets that would help us, either answer big questions or, help us live better lives and advance human society. Probably not just human society, but globally, we'll be able to advance our society, our environment, and our relationship, with our planet and hopefully the universe as well. In terms of what skill sets you would need to study STEM, I think everybody needs to have these skill sets. Not everybody is going to be interested in STEM though, but these particular skill sets, what we need to start encouraging in people from as young as possible. The ability to read is, basic, but you need that in STEM. That's going to be something that we need to encourage all people to do. Read things that, not just, would be entertaining for you, but things that will be educational as well. Read about things and really try to understand the message that people is trying to communicate to you. And I think that's a basic level skill that you need. A little bit more advanced than that. You need to be able to be good with numbers. We need to encourage people to use mathematics because we use it all the time. I mean, of course, with money, people think about math and money all the time. But, I always tell people one of the things that we do in forensic science, in particular, crime scene investigation, we use trigonometry and we use it to figure out distances between things. Because it turns out that you can't just take a million measurements at a crime scene, but you want to know accurately where things are. You could use trigonometry to help you do that. You could use the Pythagorean theorem to help you do that. But get good with numbers, get comfortable with numeracy, and understanding these very basic operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, because these will be things that you could use all the time, depending on all the things that you do. If you have children, I'm pretty sure that, dividing up food between your children or dividing snacks or things like a cake, when you do that, you're using mathematics. If you have 4 children, you can't just cut the cake in 3 pieces and get each of them 1 piece. Obviously you're gonna cut it into 4 pieces. And how do you decide, who might get a bigger piece than whom? That again, mathematics and numeracy. These are the things that we use. Yeah. So, reading, understanding information, using numbers or numeracy, and then lastly, what I would say is another skill set we need to encourage. I would definitely say, just curiosity. Encourage people to ask questions. I was always asking questions as a child. I annoyed my father doing that, and I'm still asking questions to this day, and I got really meta with it at some point because I was getting all these answers from, my father and all these other people from questions that I asked. And then one of my questions was like, how do I know you're giving me the right answer? Or how do I know that this answer is the best answer? That was really meta. And that was really what spurred my, my study of science, being able to give people better answers or the best possible answer. Because my belief is that when we have good answers to our questions or the best possible answer, that's when we can make the best possible decisions. And those have a lot of other benefits for us. But definitely in terms of studying STEM, fundamental skills is reading, numeracy, and just that propensity to continue asking questions. Because there'll always be more questions than answers. At least that's what I believe. But with those questions, that's when we could start looking for the evidence to try and find better answers or the best possible answers.
Wow. You answered that one.
I agree. That's perfect. That's a perfect answer. Oh no, am I frozen?
No, you're good.
Okay, good. So to add on to that, I think one thing that future generations should know is once you get a degree, that's not the end of the story. The degree is not going to guarantee the job. That's one thing that I did not know. I thought, so I went in as a bioengineer. And then because I didn't like math and I didn't like school, it's weird because, as a smart person, you would think that I love school, but I did not like school. So I decided, okay, I'm going to stop bioengineering. I'm just going to do math because I want to graduate next year, or I want to graduate this year rather. And if I stay in bioengineering, I have to stay for an extra year. And I didn't want to stay for extra years. So I just took a math degree. And that sounds silly because most people will be like, you took the math degree was the one that you just say, okay, I will just take this and leave. Like most people would never be interested in doing math, especially when it comes down to theory. But when I graduated, I thought, okay, I'm gonna move to America and I'm gonna get a job. Like I just have to send an application. Hey guys, I got my math degree, hire me up. That was not how it went, So some other skills I think should be added on while you're in school or even before you get to school is try your best to get some experience in the field of interest. If that means doing a fellowship or doing a summer program or something like that, try your best to do those things. A lot of times it's very competitive. And I know if you have ADHD or if you have some other thing, like even self-doubt, you might feel, well, I shouldn't bother try. I might not be as good as everybody else. I would say even then still try. Because the worst thing you could do is not take a shot. You miss all the shots you don't take. And I know that's a cliche statement, but it's definitely true for me. For instance, the job I'm in now, I was not going to apply because I didn't like how my resume looked. I was like, I could do better. My wife was like, just submit the resume you have because I think it's good. And you could always continue working on it after you apply for the job. And I applied and I got the job. And I was surprised. I was like, dang, I didn't feel like my resume was good enough, but it was. So a lot of times we don't go for things because we don't feel like it's like we're good enough, or we feel like we could do better. We always feel like we could do better. I think that's a human symptom, a symptom of being a human. You always feel like you could do better, but still, just go ahead and apply. And then the other thing I would say is, what was the other thing I was going to say? So, get work experience. And I would say, while you're in school, really have a plan about what you want to do. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know exactly what I wanted. Luckily, I knew I was interested in programming. And luckily, the field that I'm in does have a level of programming. But before I took a summer research experience for undergraduates, I didn't even know this field existed. So luckily, I had a professor who told me, hey, you should go apply for this thing and check it out. And I did. And thanks to him, I would say a big thanks to him. I can't say his name. I don't remember it because I forget names. But thanks to him, I got into it. It was biostatistics. I love biostatistics. And then from there, I transitioned into pursuing a biostatistics/epidemiology career. And that's where I'm at now. So that's what I would say. Oh, wait, there was something else I wanted to say, but I'll think on it more while somebody else talks.
I think an important thing to mention as well is that even though you have a plan, I would say personally, don't stick to that plan to the T, because then if it doesn't go according to plan, then you get disappointed and you could turn away. But I think the more important thing is that if your plan is a little bit less rigid, when a change comes, you're more willing to accept that change. And that change could be the thing that actually is what you want to do. Like, let's say you want to do mathematics and you go into it and it's okay, but then a door opens up for you to do something like cellular biology, and you just dabble there for a little bit and you're like, wow, I like this more than I thought I did, and I don't really like math as much as I like this. So now you're actually doing a career that you love and enjoy, and that brings more fulfillment than trying to stick to this rigid plan that you thought was the way to go. And I also feel that you need to be open to criticism, and you need to find people who know more than you that'll be able to guide you in the right direction that you need to go, because they might be able to see that you like cellular biology more than you like mathematics, and you won't be able to see it yourself. So having those people there to guide you is really important as well. And I think each of us has had somebody in our lives who's known more than us, like kind of nudge us in the right direction every now and then allow us to find it ourselves that, hey, we probably need to be doing this instead of this. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I appreciate all that advice, because the truth is, if you don't have a plan, or if you're not strategic in your career, like from as early as you can be, you're really going to end up having some issues at some point along the road that will probably derail, every motivation that you ever had in terms of pursuing this particular career, because hard times will come, absolutely. And that's why it's important, like Wanted said, be flexible, have your plan, but understand that when these opportunities come, right now you might feel like, it's not an opportunity, it's a roadblock, but, it's just a simple change of thinking, in terms of, readjusting yourself and your whole plan, in terms of taking the full advantage of where you're at in the particular journey. So definitely, pursuing a career in STEM, I think it can be very fruitful. I've done so many amazing things, a lot of things that I'm probably not going to have time to tell you guys about, but, so many different things. And it was all because, when I had the opportunity to get that job, the first job that I ever got after I got all my degrees, was not the job that I wanted, was not in the place that I wanted to be. But, every single time, anything new was offered to me, I just said, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do the best that I can do. And I think that really is the lesson for all of us, like there's going to be different things that come up. There's going to be things that you don't want, at least on the face value of it. But try your best anyway, because, the truth is it can be very fruitful. So yeah, excellent advice from these two guys here, man. Mino and Wanted.
I have a question though. So one thing is, as Black people, we want to grow our wealth and generational wealth and stuff like that. But a lot of times I notice, like in STEM, some STEM careers don't pay very well. It's very hard to grow, and then you have a lot of debt from school and all these other things, and then that kind of becomes a shackle holding you back. So even, for instance, you could be making 100,000 a year, but you owe 200,000 in debt, and you paying that off over 20 years or whatever the case is. So now you feel like you're actually living at 40,000 a year or less. So what are your thoughts on that? Because, like, for instance, math, there are not very careers in math that I know of. I know there are a few, but there are not many. I think engineering, technology seem to be the more higher tier STEM careers to get into. So how do you guys feel about math and science?
Well, I would certainly say that across, these acronyms, things like STEM and STEAM, the reason why, at least one of the reasons why, we have the acronym STEM is because all of these skill sets are so interrelated. When I was at undergrad with you guys, I found it so amazing to be in class with so many different engineers. And the truth is, I was better at every single class and every single engineer. Every single engineering major who was in my class, I was always better in those classes than they were. And I thought that was so cool because I really felt like, I could have been an engineer. And the truth is, if I wanted to, I probably could have transitioned. Would not have been the best in every class though, but I probably could have transitioned. And that's the thing that I think, we need to make, a much bigger thing of this whole idea of translational skills. There's different areas that you might be very good at, and those skill sets, you can use them across everything else. I'm really good at math now. When I was younger, I was poor at mathematics. But, careers that are dealing with pure math, very difficult to get into, and very high up on the academic scale. Same thing with science. People who do purely scientific research for research reasons only, there's just not enough positions for those persons. And what we're starting to see more of is the evolution of, you go to grad school to do your PhD in science. You spend 5 years doing that if you're lucky, 6 years more likely, 7 years if you're unlucky, maybe even 8 years. You finish doing your PhD in science, finally, somebody offers you a postdoc. They're probably paying you $40,000 a year for your, maybe $50,000 in debt, if you're lucky. You stay doing your postdoc for 5 years. Somebody offers you this junior entry-level professor-type position, not on tenure track, and you feel like you have to take that opportunity in order to continue going. And, that's unfortunately, and some people, they think that's a risk worth taking. But the truth is, there's just not enough positions, not enough funding to go around for people who are purely into science or purely into mathematics. What I want to tell people is that you don't need to be purely into anything. You could very well have, skills as a mathematician that would translate very well as an engineer. If you're getting into coding as a mathematician, front-end and back-end developers, people always need them. Like I said, our lives are becoming more and more digital. Mathematics is the basis of the digital realm. You could take those skills, go into engineering, particularly computer engineering. If you're a computer scientist working with technology, hardware-wise, things are always changing as well, and you could be on the cusp of doing that all the time. But that doesn't mean that, if you're like a scientist who is dealing with, let's say, a silicon researcher, researching the properties of silicon, guess what? There might be a position for you in computer science or computer technology, because what makes microchips? Silicon.
Yeah.
And we're looking at all these different things coming up now. If you're into physics, and you're really looking at particle physics, guess what? We're going to be doing quantum computing in the future. We're going to need people with those skills. Somebody's going to be looking for at least some of the skill sets that you have. So yeah, the idea that you can transfer between different areas in STEM, that's something that we need to let people know is possible. You can definitely train up yourself to do that.
So my brain isn't allowing me to let this go. So STEM is not actually an acronym, it's a backronym. So I once read a book. I used to do weird stuff like read dictionaries and things like that. And I used to read encyclopedias for fun when I was a kid. But I read this book once called, I don't remember the name, I will look it up. But it talked all about acronyms, backronyms, and initialisms. That might well be the title of the book. And so we call out of things acronyms, but they're not. So for instance, laser is an acronym. I think it's laser. Because an acronym is a word that was created from the letters, whereas a backronym is a word that already exists, and then we fit the letters to mean something. So STEM is a word that was already existing, and we created a thing out of it. And then initialism would be something like GCPD. So that's an initialism. So I just had to get that off my chest. I know it's off topic, completely off topic, but
what do you mean? This is the rabbit hole. There's no off-topic things here. So what I see mostly is that there's always been a push, go to college, get a degree, get a job. And that's been the narrative for a long time. And I guess people have been doing it. So now that everybody has done it, it's kind of like watered down the workforce where now you have to compete with everybody to, that has a degree just like you or probably better than you to get these jobs. And it's hard, it's very, very hard and very discouraging to go out there knowing that, you went to school for 8-10 years, you have your degrees, you have your credentials, and you can't find a job. And the hard part is knowing that it's not you, it's just everybody has degrees and everybody is applying, and you're not always going to be the first one that they see. And that's just the sad part about it. They're not looking at credentials only. They're looking at, the ease of picking up a resume. They like it, and then the rest just go away. So then you're just in limbo. And they don't call you and tell you, you didn't get a job because of this, this, and this. They just move on with their life, and you have to as well. So what Science mentioned about there being so much people to compete against is true. And I don't know if I have a solution for that, because if we want people to be in STEM, we're going to need them to go to school and get degrees. But they have to come into a world where everybody already has their degrees and everybody already has these jobs. And if a company has somebody that can do multiple things, like you mentioned, they're not really going to hire somebody new to come in unless they absolutely have to. So I think we need to possibly create more jobs, but I don't know how to do that. That's not something that I'll be able to do or even talk about.
And also, of course, that's where the work experience comes in while you're in school. Mm-hmm. So if you have that on your resume, that you have maybe you shadowed somebody, then even though it's a competitive market, you're more likely to stand out. Yeah. And also, I would suggest reading Resumes for Dummies. Very, very helpful book.
Definitely.
It is very competitive, and I'm glad that Wanted brought up that issue, because there's so many disappointments along the journey, the career journey, possibly for any career, but, for people who look like us, young black men, typically persons who are immigrants, I mean, well, maybe not really me, but
me, yes.
Yeah, definitely. For persons who do not have citizenship of the countries where they currently live, it's very, very different ball game. Very, very different ball game. We need to, understand that there's going to be a lot of people who are disappointed. My thing with promoting STEM is that, there's going to be somebody out there, some young person, who just has an innovative spirit, who wants to be in a career or in a field where, that is fully realized. Not necessarily to tell everybody, you want to be in STEM, well, this is what you got to do. You definitely need your degree. I could talk about my journey, but a big part of that is the fact that, I'm currently here in a country that I wasn't born in. and I'm really trying my best to get into, to break into the forensic science community. It's not easy. It has been very difficult. As you can imagine, a pandemic didn't make it any easier. So, these are the things that we deal with along the journey. We definitely need to consider talking about, as early as possible, how difficult it can be.
I feel like there's also a new camp coming about where you have people like us who start streaming, who start doing vlogs, and they blow up. And now the new narrative is, well, you don't actually have to go to college, which for some people is true. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to invest so much time and money into school to be successful. You can do other things, but even in that, you have this watered down workforce where you're not always going to be the one to blow up. And it's like wherever you turn, there's so many people already doing the same thing that you're doing. And in terms of STEM, I haven't heard much about STEM recently in the past few years because I've been out of academia. So have you guys heard a collective, push for STEM in the more recent years?
There's definitely still a push for STEM, man. Like I mentioned, this year I've done over 25 talks to different groups, all about promoting STEM and talking about my career journey. And these are people who, they're in the States, they're on the west coast of Canada, on the east coast of Canada, they're in the city of Toronto, in smaller cities close by, all over the place. There is a big push for STEM. And one of the reasons that is because we're starting to see, definitely with the pandemic, how scientific information impacts people's daily lives. And I've always thought that's exactly what forensic science does. Because, like using forensic science, we could figure out, who would have acted in these particularly malicious ways and who is responsible for them. That's a big impact on people's lives because some people, they had this idea that they would never get caught or maybe they could avoid any repercussions for their actions. And some of those people, do end up getting caught based on forensic science. But, look at what we're doing now, like definitely here in the city of Toronto, there's a number of restrictions in place to help and limit the spread of the virus that causes COVID-19. And that's all because of science. We keep on impacting our lives with science all the time. If our lives are going to get more digital, it just means that these big giants who control information, people like Facebook and Google in particular, they're going to have to get much, much better at using that information to continue to make money, and somehow they're going to have to balance that with the ethical requirements of the field. We need people who have different ideas about STEM to come in and see how we could better do that, how we could better handle things. And of course, outside of just working in this profession, I think everybody should have some level of comfort with STEM because, personally, I could talk about one particular example really quickly. Personally, I want people who are working in these different sectors to understand STEM because I had an issue when I was living in St. Kitts with my electricity bill. It was way higher than it should have been. And I was trying to explain as best as I could to these customer service people, like, it's actually impossible for my bill to have been this high. It is a mistake. In order for it to have been this high, the example that I used was that I was living with a roommate at the time. I was saying I would have had to clone myself. Human cloning, not currently something that can be done. I'd have had to clone myself twice.
Wow.
And I would have had to clone my roommate twice. I'd have to have bought 2 more additional appliances for every single appliance that we have in the house. And we'd have had to been using them at the same time every single time. That's how this bill could have been tripled.
Wow.
And they could not understand that. It was like, this guy thinks he's so smart. And I got really pissed at that point. But if people understand mathematics at the very least,
Yeah.
then we could just look at the bill and be like, it's true. There's no way he could have tripled his usage in 1 month. Like, that's just unlikely. I mean, we're not even saying doubled, So,
Even without
I hope that people outside of STEM can just have some comfort level with understanding scientific information, mathematics, just so that, we can relate better to each other.
even without math, I believe that just looking at the past couple bills and looking at this bill, you can see, well, this is really strange. Just look at the chart. If that spike is a mistake, and that's without even using math.
Math and logic they kind of go hand in hand. So I think just improving your math skills will improve your ability to have some logic, because that's what you just said is a logical statement, and what science said is about using math. And if they have neither, then you know.
I mean, they're doing, not to knock them, but they're doing customer service. They're not really looking at, data or trends. They're just trying to help customers and or help the business.
And that was my thing, It was like, can I please speak to somebody who's an engineer? Like, I actually said that, and they were like, they put me on to the guy who was in charge of customer service. Ended up talking to him, and I was like, so what's your background then? Do you even understand what I'm saying? And he was like, well, I came into the business reading meters. And I was like, see, this is what you used to do. You used to read meters. Like, how could you fucking understand what I'm telling you? I mean, I was so pissed. And I still had to pay. Well, I didn't actually pay the money because I felt like, it was my ethical responsibility to hold on to this point. But my dad was like, dude, you see this balance? It's on my property. I'm going to actually pay this bill. I'm going to set up a payment arrangement to do that. And I was like, fine. But, I'm telling you, something is wrong. But yeah, these things happen. And it's because, maybe maybe I expect too much of people. But I feel like if you're going to be in a position, where you have to interact with people, based on data, based on their experiences, it's good to have a background knowledge in these areas because it can help you better relate to people.
I'm starting to
So
understand.
what I'm hearing is it's good when you go to college, get a math degree, and then work in McDonald's. That's what I'm hearing.
No. I hearing that
That's a joke. I joke.
I know, like back in UVI, there were psychology majors doing science classes and they didn't know why. There were science majors doing psychology courses and they didn't know why. And I think this speaks to the why. Why would I need to know how to be logical about how I'm thinking? Well, this is why. Because you could have a job doing one thing, then something else comes up that's totally out of your field. And instead of feeling uncomfortable and out of place, you can actually apply a little bit of what you learned to say, well, I can help you now. Even though I'm doing customer service, I understand that this doesn't make any sense and I'll try to help you out with that. So, it makes sense now having these degrees that make you dabble in other things because now you can understand where someone else is coming from.
Yeah, I think colleges should promote more multidisciplinary academics, because even in like my job, right, we have disease epidemiologists, we have injury epidemiologists, we have behavioral health epidemiologists, and a lot of times, for instance, when I was working in behavioral health, we worked a lot of times with the injury team, because injury and behavioral health do have some overlap. For instance, if we have a self harm ideation or something like that. But on the other hand, some of the fields, some of the epidemiological fields don't cross over. So, like for instance, injury and disease, we can't really find ways to work together because there's very rare that we will find something that will cause you to have an injury because of a disease. But the reason I'm bringing that up is just because before I started working for them, a lot of the different groups did not interact at all. It's only recently that they started trying to have a push to be more multidisciplinary and have more dynamic um, research. So I think that's another push. Besides just the quantitative, qualitative push, there's also the push for trying to diversify and look at multidisciplinary ways of looking at research. I think that's something that maybe even colleges could start doing too.
That makes a lot of sense. Anything to add, science, or are you good? Okay. So let's have some fun here and talk about the the importance of separating what you see at work from like home and day-to-day life. So directly towards science because, you're at the star today. Has there ever been a time where you looked at a case or a case file and you're like, well, I can't have lunch today? And because they just turned you off so badly.
Thank God I haven't had such a case. I mean, probably, relative to other people who don't work in the field, I've done a lot of, things that people probably would think, like absolutely nasty. But, I love the work that I do. A big part of what I did when I was working in forensic science in St. Kitts was going to autopsies of persons who had died unnatural deaths. Some persons we actually found died natural deaths as well, but mostly in terms of death related to crime or suspected criminal activity. Done a lot of autopsies, probably over 50 autopsies so far in my career. And the human body, I don't think it was meant for us to look at other humans in that way. When you're on the autopsy table, it's definitely not natural to do. Everything, the sight of it, the smell of it, the sounds, the textures, because definitely involved some touching, a lot of weird stuff that I've done, in the name of forensic science, and something that I've been able to compartmentalize, and I don't think that's a very good thing. It's good in the sense that I've never ever brought it home. I've never ever tried to come home and be like, yeah, man, Akila, who's my wife. Akila, you know what I saw today? I never ever did that. Which is good. Didn't burden anybody in my family with the foolishness that has happened in terms of investigating crimes and like heinous things that people have done. But it's also bad in terms of, never really had an outlet for it at the time. So, major impacts, on how you relate to people and your own mental health. But in terms of like funny stuff that I've seen, like I remember one case was a woman was just, found dead in her house, like people were checking up on her, couldn't actually get into the house, but were able to see that she was just lying on the ground, not moving. Like, so the police were able to break into the door and they called us crime scene investigators. And one of my colleague, as soon as that door broke open, he was like, you smell it? You smell it? Somebody dead. And it's like, those things really happen. And it's like, you start to get accustomed to the smell of death. And like that colleague was somebody who was like, he had that nose, like, he could like differentiate between animal, human, domesticated animal, wild animal. Like he had the nose. So, like that really happened, and he could bring that up anytime he wanted. But in terms of us not really taking it home, like there were times when really really bad things happened. And like we basically had that code of silence. Like outside of the office, we're not talking about this. Like it was really just an unwritten thing. We would never really go to any bars, and like, all of a sudden just be talking about cases and those things, the images that we've seen, scents that we've smelled. So, thankfully, we're able to do that. And I think, it's really important to not burden other people with these things, but it's also important to have some way, to let it out, somebody else who you could talk to or discuss it with, just so you keep your humanity.
Who have you joined, like a group or something like that, like of your peers or something? How did you get it out eventually?
Well, I'm definitely not a good example for that. I'm somebody who I've hardly ever talked about these things, and I do think that it has some impact on me. Like I was before I started working as a crime scene investigator, I was never really a heavy sleeper. But since that time, I do not sleep well. I'm a very light sleeper. Anything could wake me up. And I go to sleep late, wake up late. It has had impacts on my life, So I'm not a good example of what you should do. I haven't joined any groups, haven't been to therapy. And these are things that, I would definitely consider. But, sometimes I feel like the pressures of even life at home as a stay-at-home dad, sometimes get in the way of that kind of time.
That's deep. What about you, Mino? How's your job and work-home balance?
So when I was working in injury, a lot of times we had cases where people would self-delete, and reading. Sometimes we had. Like, I remember one case we had to read through to categorize them into different categories as we were trying to create the data set. And I had to read a lot of cases of how they self-deleted, what happened before they self-deleted, and all these other things, and even some case of domestic abuse, or so I think I read one homicide. But just reading those things, just reading it, and there's a lot of details in there. That had a big effect on me. I don't think I ever told anyone about that. I think just like science, I didn't think that was something that I would tell to anyone at home because I didn't want to affect their mental health along with my own. But I would say, generally speaking, in my field, there's no real separation because a lot of times it is something interesting to me, at least, where I want to share it with someone because I think they'll be interested too, especially since my wife is a scientist as well. So because we both like science, we both like talking about the topics and kind of like, oh, what I learned today? I learned that BMI doesn't have a big of an effect on injury as I thought. It's actually BMI has a less effect because maybe they're running slower because they're bigger or whatever. We think we might talk through like why it could be that way or something like that. So sometimes I do bring it home. I can be very specific because of different reasons such as HIPAA and all that kind of stuff. But just talking about the generalities of what I do is sometimes interesting. I wouldn't say I do it often, but I do sometimes do it. I think the hard part about separating work from home is that since I'm working from home now, sometimes I work for fun because I do enjoy coding. I do enjoy database management and stuff like that. So sometimes I'm up at 3 a.m. coding when I should have stopped working like 4 hours ago. So stuff like that is kind of hard now that I'm teleworking. But besides that, it's not that hard.
Well, for me, I work in public works on the streets division. So it's harder for me to separate it because if I'm driving through a city and I see a stop sign not at the right height, I'm like, that stop sign's wrong. We could just blow through it and they won't give us a ticket. Or there's lots of potholes here, or the street signs look funny. Like, it's always coming. So I have to like just turn it off completely and go back to the time before I knew any of the information or any of the data here. Because everything that I see that happens on the road, it has to do with work. So I just know of these things. I mean, even my wife calls me like, "Hey, there's a stop sign here. It looks funny." Because now she's taking it too, because that's how we are. So now I have to go and deal with that. But the part that I try the best to leave at work is like dealing with administration and dealing with the customers who call complaining over and over and over again. It's like we're trying to help, but there's only so much we can do in a day. And I think I have to just leave those conversations at work and just deal with what I can deal with and just talk about, changing some stop sign here or being 30 feet in the air, fixing a light or something. Just talk about the fun stuff.
Yeah, it's always good to talk about the fun stuff. And when Science was telling his story that we all laughed at, I kind of felt bad a little bit because I was like, we laughing at from somebody dead, but at the same time, it was a funny story. I hope nobody in the audience got offended because we do live in a culture nowadays where people take things a lot more seriously. So, audience members, if you are out there and you didn't find it funny, we apologize ahead of time. But it was a funny story. I can't imagine having a friend or a colleague like that who was like, "Oh, you smell that? That's what it is. Like I can imagine it in real life. I could sometimes even imagine me being that friend. Actually, I imagine if me and Wanted were crime scene investigators, I would be that friend. So yeah, I kind of related a little bit too.
So science, as I talked about before, there's many shows that, highlight forensic science. I remember you saying you don't really watch them, but I wanted to ask a question on like, what's the most realistic one? And are forensic scientists the up and coming rock stars of pathology?
Well, the most realistic forensic science show, I would say none of them are realistic. There's always things that, you know, are hyped up for entertainment value on these shows. So, like a lot of stuff that you see, things happening really quickly, that doesn't happen in real life forensic science. Like you get called to a scene, you have to actually put on what's called personal protective equipment, and that doesn't look as flashy as one forensic scientist who is a woman actually. I remember in her presentation she said, you'll never see cleavage on a crime scene. You see that on TV. And the truth is, like, nobody has any exposed skin on a sensitive crime scene, for a fact. But the forensic science show that I enjoy the most was the original CSI. I don't watch it now, and I was telling you guys, that there's gonna be a reunion of the guy who was the original team leader on that, a character called Gil Grissom.
Yeah.
And Gil Grissom, he's actually somebody who had a PhD in biology. Like purely, his character bio is awesome. He had a PhD in biology. He was actually working with insects from since he was in high school. He became an entomologist, just based on his training around insects. And then, just applied for this job to be a CSI because he thought, might as well, Actually got it and fell in love with it. And he's actually, one of those characters who's become really lovable for, just being a normal person outside of the lab, but inside of the lab, somebody very technically proficient. And, on the crime scene, excellent example of a CSI in terms of, being detail oriented, trying to make sure that the right procedures are followed. Like that's something that, we try and do in the field as well. But, a lot of other aspects of the character, definitely just more fiction than anything else. But, definitely a favorite of people in the community. Like real crime scene investigators look up to Gil Grissom. And he was a team leader who was somebody who was, not at all toxic with his team. And in real life, we deal with toxic team leaders all the time. Can't tell you, like people who would work you to the bone for no reason other than to please people who are above them. So yeah, we deal with a lot of those things as well. But I have fun watching some shows. I used to watch Bones for a while as well. I liked that. No other show really that I liked in the fictional aspect.
You mentioned something that touched on a point I wanted to make while I was thinking about the show before, and that's a message to people who are coming to STEM. It's like, if you like bugs, keep working with bugs, keep studying bugs. If you like the stars, keep looking at the stars. If you like math, keep doing math. Don't let anybody change what you love, and don't conform to fit in with the crowd, because then that will only help you go further into STEM, because you're putting all your effort into this thing and you're building it and building it and building it over time to where you can be somebody at the top of the career, at the top of the field, because you studied this for so long. Instead of trying to say, well, no one likes my son, for example, he used to love dinosaurs. He still kind of does. But during like fifth and sixth grade, he knew what an archaeologist was, and no one else knew what that was. So he felt out of place, not because they made fun of him, but just because he felt out of place because no one knew what a paleontologist was when he had career day, and he was all dressed down, and no one was doing that. Everybody was a police officer or a doctor or a teacher, and he was the only dinosaur guy there, dressed down in his dino gear, dino hat. and he felt bad because he was out of place. But if you really enjoy something, just keep doing it, because one day it'll help you be what you want to be.
You know, I was about to ask a question about something like this, and you kind of brought it up, thankfully, where when you have children, you want to kind of encourage them to pursue their dreams or pursue their interests. And I was thinking, like, as a parent, you kind of have to be their biggest hype person, right? Like, you want to be like, oh, you like dinosaurs? Okay, we're going to museum this day. Okay, we're going to try and find a live excavation site. That's probably impossible, but like you try and I would hope most parents would try to really pursue the dream or pursue the interest until either the child lose interest, because that happens. I think a lot. Children shift interest as they grow up and mature, and they find something else that's interesting, or maybe they find out that's not actually for them. Some people's skills set, some people I feel gravitate more towards what they're strong in. So a lot of times you might shift. Well, I'm not actually that good at thinking about rocks, for example. If you like rocks, maybe I'm better at looking at bugs. So my interest shift to bugs now. So I was just thinking about that, like being the hype man for your kid. I don't know. I just love talking about kids. As you guys know, I'm not a parent yet, but I fantasize about it. So as parents, how do you guys hype your kids? How do you get them to stay interested in their interests and stuff like that?
Take it away.
It's a lot of conversation. Have a daughter who's going to be 16 this year, next month actually. And it's just a lot of trying to figure out where these children are in their head. Like it's just a lot of asking questions because there were a lot of things that my daughter was interested in that in a pre-pandemic world would have been perfect for her to continue pursuing. One of them was dance. And, in a post-pandemic world now, like we're not really sure how dance is going to go, So like, what else is she interested in? She's one of those people who watch streamers play games because she plays the same games. Like I don't get that personally because I never liked watching other people play video games. I always wanted to be one of the players, but I was never actually good. So I couldn't stay on. I was always losing. But like even that, we talk about esports every so often because like children recognize that there are people out there like getting popular off of doing these things that they enjoy. There's also streaming and making content. Like she used to make these really nice short videos that she would post up on WhatsApp statuses. And I thought that was really cool, to like watch people make content because, I still don't know many Caribbean content creators, like so things like that, just actually paying attention to what they do, like looking at her pictures on Instagram, I mean, like I don't like all the pictures because I mean some of them like I don't get, they're just not my taste. But like you pay attention, you ask questions, and you just try to continue looking at, talking about or figuring out what else they're interested in.
I think when it comes to my kids, I'm going to be the extra hype guy. Like I said, when my son had career day, it was my first time being like a dad figure to him. Like he's my stepson. So I was like, oh, you like dinosaurs? All right. We went to Walmart. I bought a whole paleontologist outfit, like shorts, the khaki, a notebook, the hat, binoculars, a brush. Like I went all out. And like every time he has an interest in something, I'm there. So one day he was at his window. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm looking at birds. Oh, you like birds? I went to Amazon. I got a bird book. I got some more binoculars. Like, I'm going to be there to help you do what you want to do. So now he's a YouTuber. So like, oh, you like YouTube? All right. So now the plan is to get him a good computer, help him. I got him an animation tablet. We're working on his page now. So like, whatever my children want to do, I'm always going to be there for them 100%, probably 200% to him. Like, probably just embarrassing them. But hey, that's me. If they want to play basketball, I'll try to be at every game. I'll be the loudest parent there.
Yeah, I like both of y'all answers. I take in these mental notes for my future kids, because so what I learned so far is ask a lot of questions, because you honestly, I know children don't always feel comfortable just coming to their parent and talking about whatever is on their mind. You have to check in often. I'm starting to realize, especially you might, a lot of times kids are good, but sometimes you still have to guide them. I think a lot of parenting is a lot of mentoring in a way. I liked Wanted's answer too, because yeah, just being the hype man, being extra, going to every game. I could see myself, my kid, Dad, I like soccer, try and play soccer, and I out there trying to play soccer even though I completely trash. I think positive reinforcement is documented as the best way, and so I like that answer. So let me ask a question. Want to be asking all the questions, man. I want to get into a fun question too. So this is gonna be a question not gonna be left field, guys. I'm sorry. I like to just throw a wrench in the machinery, So if you guys won the lottery, let's say you won $1 billion, just a random number. What would your today look like in 4 years? And would you still keep working at your current job, or would you pursue other things? And then another follow-up is there a job that if you were dead broke, this lottery never happened, is there a job that you would just not do no matter what they pay you? Like they could be paying you $1 billion, you still wouldn't do it.
I believe the guest should always go first.
Yeah, man, thanks a lot. If I won $1 billion, 5 years from now, or 4 years from now, you said?
Yeah.
Well, my Sundays after being a billionaire, I would like to really be, out on the water somewhere, on a nice little boat. I was telling my wife this yesterday, actually. Like, when I get decent money, my go-to outfit is gonna be a nice polo shirt from Polo Ralph Lauren, some really short shorts. I'm gonna be wearing these Lacoste slides, like, $100 Lacoste slides, and I'm just gonna be on my boat, some nice shades, like chilling, man, like sipping wine on a Sunday, because I think that I've always been somebody who likes leisure time, and I'm probably just really lazy. But I really like leisure time. Like, I used to really love, all the hype, like the hardcore drinking at parties and what's not. Part of me still likes that. But, like, I feel like if I had everything that I needed monetarily, then I would be after some good liming, just, sit back and relax type lines. So that would really be my thing. If there was a job that I would not do, this is cool, actually. There's actually 2 jobs that I definitely would not do, regardless of how much money it is. My parents' jobs, actually. So I never told you guys this, but my father, he's actually an Anglican priest, Christian priest. And, like growing up around that, never wanted to tell people that, because they treat you like trash just because of the choices that, this man has made, And I mean, I'm a Christian personally, it's one of my big convictions. Definitely not one of those Christians against dinosaurs, ridiculous. A lot of foolish things happen in the Christian community. Let me just acknowledge that right now. But, I like Christianity, but I would never be a priest. I would never be a pastor. I would never try to start my own church. And if somebody had all that going already and they were like, dude, you'll be perfect, I'll be like, nah, not me, And my mother is a teacher, I mean, I don't know anything about teaching. I've done teaching before at the university level. Like sometimes I did tutoring, sometimes I really enjoyed it. Sometimes I felt like, like this is the worst possible profession I could ever do. And so if somebody was like, we need a high school teacher, we're going to pay you $1 billion, I'd probably be like, I'm just the wrong person for the job. I mean, if it was like a university level position, I'd probably like, I would consider it, I would consider that. But I don't like teaching. Anything underneath of freshman university is a no. Definitely not gonna do that.
That's interesting because you do so well at like explaining like forensic science and stuff. And well, teaching is a different beast because you have to do a lot more than just talking. You have to make a lesson plan and all these things. My mom's a teacher, so I know a little bit. Yeah, so I understand. I don't like teaching either.
Teaching is a 24/7 job.
Definitely.
I don't know if you could ever pay teachers enough because we need teachers at every single level. But I feel like the younger you go, like the more teachers have to deal with. Like, how do you relate to if you are a millennial, it's already so hard to relate to somebody who's Gen Z, you know? And I'm thinking about those Generation Alpha children that I have as well, because I have two toddlers. I don't know if in 10 years, I'm going to be able to get them to settle down and pay attention to what I'm saying. As a parent, imagine as a teacher.
Yeah.
It's not, I would never try.
That's an interesting thing that you brought up, because in my mind, I created a graph where you have, time. And then on the other side of the graph, you have, what was the other thing? Basically, what you said in like the age difference between who's teaching who is a lot harder as you go further into the future, because the older people, they can't deal with the younger people because it's a different time. There's different discipline, different ways to talk. You have to take into account all the mental health issues. It's a lot different from what it used to be. So I appreciate you brought that up. Now for me, $1 billion. What would today look like? I have to agree with our guest. Like, I would not be in a confined space unless we're doing the podcast, because I would still do that even if I had $1 billion. But would I still look at my current job? No, I don't even think I would work. Period. I already talked to my wife about having a lot of money. We get a nanny and a living maid, and she's like, "No." I'm like, "Well, I'm paying for it, so it's going to happen." So they're gonna have their own guest house, just like Jeffrey in Fresh Prince. And a job that I would not do. I still feel like I would not do retail or do food, no matter how much I was paid. It's just not for me. Like, I just can't.
Yeah, retail. I worked in customer service. I used to work at Subway while I was in grad school, and I would tell you, it's like nowadays whenever I interact with somebody who works in customer service, I'm always extra nice to them because I know that what they've been through that day. They probably had a customer previously who just unrealistically expect them to do magic, or cussing them out as if they have control over the situation. They literally have no control. They're just doing what they're told. Granted, on the other side of things, some people take their job a little too seriously. Like, yo, you ain't making this money for yourself, so why are you stinging on the like pack of like ketchup? Like, it's really not that expensive for this company to buy some more ketchup. You can give me some extra ketchup. So there's a little give and take there, but I try my best to be extra nice and understanding because I've been in their shoes before. So yeah, it's a hard thing to work in. Now for me, if I had $1 billion, I would do a mix of both of y'all because I think I would want to spend more quality time and with family. I think if you have more time, you want to fill that time with family and relationships and community. Um, and I think I would want to do what Wanted did, where I would want to invest in stuff in a way that I could live off the dividends, so I wouldn't have to work. But I think I would still want to work. But I think the difference would be I would work on things that I'm actually interested in. Like for instance, I want to write a book. I would have more time to do that. I want to do the podcasting. I would have more time to actually contribute and edit videos and stuff like that. So I think what the $1 billion will do for me is free up my time. I won't have to grind as hard to do like working on 9 to 5. I could spend that time doing other things. And I think one job I would never do is work in waste management. You can't pay me enough to be in a sewer or wading through poop or not. I can't do it. I'm sorry.
I have to do that right now, actually, for the most part, because public works and public infrastructure are connected now. So we're like sister departments. So on Friday night at 1 o'clock in the morning, I had to go deal with a sewer line that was backed up. So we had to get that sewer line to go from one manhole to the other manhole. I mean, since I'm not necessarily utilities, I didn't want to directly work with it, but I helped the best I can to get the pipes going. But yeah, I fear that there's gonna be a day where I'm gonna have to be like, they'll be like, yep, you have to get in the hole to help, and I'll be like, oh man, I am done after this. Like I'm going home.
And I've been like, nope, fire me now because I ain't going in.
And those things sound really appealing to me. I mean, maybe from my crime scene life, because like crime scene, dirtiest job you could ever think of. But I mean, I enjoyed working crime scenes. I'm telling you, I mean, it's really exhilarating. And I think waste management would be really cool. You know, definitely even working at, you know, a plant, like looking at tons of shit flow by. You know, I feel like I could spend my time doing that. You know, and I could definitely walk in it because I've walked in everything at this point. So, so yeah,
That boy said
I
tons
would
of
do
shit.
that job. I've done it, man. It's been done. You know, like
Man. I think we have one more fun question written down. So, if we lived in a world with superheroes, supervillains, and other creative phenomena, how would it affect your job?
I mean, that's something that I don't think, you know, anime or the movies or any of the comic books feature enough because we already have this entire global infrastructure to deal with, you know, these bad actors. So if there was a Thanos ever to come around, you know, it would be something a lot more sophisticated than these big armies and big, you know, tanks and what's not coming to face him. And like, you know, people don't realize like, you know, there's a lot of insidious stuff, you know, that's going on, you know, like a lot of the weapons right now are not on the planet, you know, they're orbiting the planet, for instance. So, you know, these things, I mean, it would definitely have a big effect on forensic science because, you know, like it doesn't matter now. Like, you know, do you really need to go to court to have sufficient physical evidence to prove that this guy, I mean, a supervillain who could teleport from one place to the other, did this crime? Like, how else did the crime get committed? You know, you know, like what evidence are you gonna find that he teleported? You know,
Yeah.
so like it would probably throw all the current practices around physical evidence out the door and lead to some really theoretical stuff coming mainstream. But you know, in terms of like people with brutish strength, you know, who could just like, you know, force their way into any place, anytime, kill anybody, get away. I mean, at that point, you don't need forensic scientists. You know, you need something of similar
Of course.
capacity to match that person. Yeah,
Yeah.
you need Avengers.
hmm
So yeah, it would probably throw forensic science completely out the door because what's the utility of that? You know, if the only person who could catch these perpetrators is somebody who has metahuman abilities, you know, then we don't need the justice system really, you know. And even though somebody like Superman, you know, kind of tries to work within the justice system, I mean, it doesn't make sense. You know,
Yeah.
like he's not accountable to anybody. You know, like he's not working, he's not on the payroll, he's not ethically bound to anything that we know of other than his own self. I mean, you know, we can't work together. I don't see it happening. So forensic science would have to go, and these superhuman people would have to come in, which was probably, if you ever watched Jupiter Ascending, I think it's called on Netflix, similar themes. So that would be something good to check out.
I like that Barry Allen is actually a forensic scientist for the most part, and he tries to like pretend to like not understand well. Somebody just came in here and destroyed everybody. He's like, no, if you look at this right here, you can it's okay, we understand. Like it wasn't a human, but like he has to try and pretend to live that dual lifestyle. And I think for forensic science, it'll be a lot of bodies left behind after like a meteor comes through or somebody uses laser beam, but you already know what's happening. So like as you said, what's the point in like studying it? It was that guy with the laser eyes that did it.
To try wrenching that, what if everybody on the planet had powers? Like, what's that show again? My Hero Academia.
Mm-hmm.
What if everybody on the planet had powers? Well, you think that would be a way for forensic science to still exist, because now you have to differentiate between this fire dude and this fire dude, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. I've never actually watched My Hero personally, but yeah, I mean, I understand the premise of that show, and I think it's really cool. And yeah, like you said, like being able to identify specific persons, even though they might have very similar powers, that again, would probably throw out everything that we're currently doing, probably go away. But a lot of the theoretical stuff, that was on the fringes of forensic science, that could become mainstream in order to help with those issues. But definitely for somebody like me, laboratory trained, go to the crime scene and collect physical evidence, like even if it's microscopic, you're collecting it still. I mean, like different levels to that now, like thinking about, you know, guys who could spontaneously combust, like, what exactly are you going to be looking for? I have no idea. So yeah, it'd be a whole new breed of forensic science in that kind of world.
What about you, Mino? How would they affect your world or your job?
I was thinking more like I never worked in infectious epidemiology or disease epidemiology, but I was thinking from that perspective, like what if we had a super disease
Mm,
such as like a zombie disease or something? I think that would be where epidemiology could potentially shine through,
mhm.
where we could, because epidemiology is basically trying to understand how diseases spread so that you could prevent it, mitigate it, and stuff like that. And I think that would be a good place for us to shine, because if you have a zombie disease, if we could prevent it before it could spread, then guess what? No apocalypse, you know? So that's what I was thinking about. In terms of injury epidemiology, I think kind of like what science said, with superheroes doing stuff, it's kind of hard to say, well, this is how you could prevent this. Well, the way to prevent that is for you to get super strength too, and that's probably impossible. So, yeah, that's my answer.
When it comes to me, now that I've been working this job, every time I watch a superhero show or a movie with superheroes, I get so pissed. Because, like, who gonna fix the road? Oh, man. I have to be working all around the clock. And after you done fix the road, somebody else gonna come through again and destroy the road. Knocking down the stop signs, knocking down the street signs, knocking down the stop lights, the street. Oh, my. It's gonna be a bunch of work. And then you have people in the sewers, like what, the crocodile guy. Now you have to like fix the pipes. The infrastructure is just too much. Like, and I am leaning towards the sides of the senators and the people that's like, well, you're costing us so much money. Yeah, fine them. Because you have workers now. Well, I guess you create more jobs, but you have people that are working here daily trying to rebuild the city to back what it was just for it to get destroyed again. So like there needs to be like a fund or something set into place to be able to fix the infrastructure that's getting destroyed on almost like a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely. If you have like people Fantastic Four level or Tony Stark level type superheroes operating in a place like New York City, I don't see how those guys could just, live rent free. Like they would have to be paying major money all the time. It's like if you're gonna be a superhero in here, helping us, catch these guys, as much damage as you're doing, I mean, it's probably evening out all the good that you're doing anyway. You gotta pay some money, man. Like seriously.
But then you have the contrast of, Tony Stark versus let's say Peter Parker. So like Peter Parker can afford to, but he doesn't really destroy things. But like, like Tony Stark's and your Batman's over here, and then you have people who are like Hal Gordon or Spider-Man. They're not really making any income to be able to pay back for what they're doing, but they are doing a service and a good deed. So I don't know how you would find the balance between charging Tony Stark for destroying something and charging Spider-Man for destroying something.
Wouldn't you charge the villains instead?
How you gonna give back the money? Like this is the key question though. Like, because I mean, for the most part, like people who are like bad guys with superpowers, very limited destruction and then they get what they want. But like, I have to chase that guy now as a, superhero, you know, and I have to try to beat his ass across, Metropolis. Then, yeah, I mean, I could have just let him get away and everything else would have been fine.
That's literally true. That's literally just turn around, don't be a vigilante, and let the police deal with it. But then,
So it sounds like it actually cost the city less to let the villains get away.
yeah.
Just like, you know what, he's still that's FDIC insured. Let's just move on.
Definitely.
It's a fact though. Seriously.
That's crazy. Man.
So you know, when I thought of this question, I literally was thinking about Wanted, because I was like, this would suck for Wanted, man. Like, but you know what's funny, in the movies where they have superheroes, how do they repair the city so fast? It's like episode end, next episode city back to normal. Like, y'all have superpowers too because y'all rebuilding this place like it was never destroyed.
I feel like comics and cartoons have a disconnect in time. So I feel like every episode is the same day but different villain. That's how I feel, because there's no way episode 2 is like the next day. It has to be like 5 months down the line or something, and nobody ages.
But I was just thinking that, like, because I remember watching one Superman cartoon when I was younger, when some villain destroyed a bridge, and Superman basically like had to collect these pieces of the bridge while they were falling. Like cars were still on top of the pieces, and he had to like lift them back up and transport them safely to land. And I'm thinking, like, if he's that strong and he could fix the bridge, you just call him back after and be like, yeah, so when you're gonna come back and put back our skyscraper? Because I mean,
That's a solution.
Oh man.
Y'all break it, y'all fix it.
Man. But that's a good question though.
Oh, sorry, bro. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's a good question. Go ahead.
I said I was thinking someone like Tony Stark. He's a billionaire. He had the technology. He could repair things. He could send his drones out to do all the repairs. So, yeah, I think that's a good solution for sure. Just have the superheroes fix it, and I don't know, they could do a public service or something in addition to. Because I think, when we think about superheroes in modern times, we think about people who do public services. We think about the military, we think about firemen. So in these shows, these animes or whatever, with these superheroes, they don't show enough of them just doing regular community service. They're always showing them doing the big stuff. So I don't know. I think it would be nice to see. I mean, it might be boring for some people, but I think it would be nice to see a comic where the superhero is actually just in the community, just being a part of the community.
I think it would be good to have a show or a cartoon that documents the life of the people that have to clean up after the superheroes. Because that would be funny for me, from my point of view. Because, like, yeah, you gotta fix this whole road. Like, the entire stretch of road has to be rebuilt again. And the second point I want to make is that you can't really charge the criminals, because usually the criminals are doing crime because they have no money. So then you wouldn't get any money back.
But then you have criminals like Kingpin, Doctor Doom. Like, these guys are billionaires. So I don't know. I think you're right. But I also kind of, this is going to be super off topic, but this kind of reminds me of like modern times with just regular human beings. People doing crimes a lot of times because they don't have the means to survive, and they feel like crime is the only way they can survive. And often our criminal system makes matters worse instead of helping them. It's like, oh, you selling drugs because you're poor. Well, guess what? Now you're in jail. You're gonna lose time in your life. You're gonna be more poor. Your family gonna suffer. Your mental health gonna suffer. Like, it's not a very like, hey, we realize why you're doing this. Let me try and help you so you don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So, random thought.
Cool. I think we're wrapping up now. You guys want to cover one more thing before we wrap up? So, one thing that we didn't get to speak about that I think we should. I think science mentioned it a little bit, is that there's not a lot of people that look like us that come from where we're from that we're able to find easily. And in our behind the scenes talk, I mentioned having options in YouTube and Twitch to be able to find people from the Caribbean or from South Africa or from anywhere. And I think that would help people all over connect with people that they know and people that they look like. And I think it would help us see that maybe there are lots of people that make content out there. It's just that they're being overshadowed by the bigger people.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the world of content creation, like, you take your pick, you could find anything that you want. But, I want it to be that, when my sons log on one day, like, say, like, we were living back in the Caribbean, they log on, just open up YouTube. Why not have the YouTube homepage, you know, in my country, referencing people who are doing work, in my country, who are monetized in my country. Why not? Because the truth is, growing up and pursuing the career that I was pursuing, it was never because, I know this black scientist, or I know this black forensic scientist, or this forensic scientist who works in St. Kitts. It was never like that. But, I do think that there is value in showing people, like, listen, this is somebody, from your village, and, guess what? He makes good comedy too, guess what? This meme that's going around the world right now, that was actually made by your neighbor next door. Like, why not, show people that content and let people, be biased to their local content creators up front, like the same way how we say support local small businesses. Well, man, why shouldn't we support local small content creators? And I want to see more of that, because now that I'm older and this ecosystem is really, really big, I think to myself all the time, man, I remember that guy who used to make kites in St. Kitts, it would have been so cool to have a video of him on YouTube, to show people, like, this is how you make kites. And that's not to say that you can't find out how to make kites if you were to, put it into Google. But, like, why not show somebody from the same background as me doing it to me, you know? And there are ways that can be done. I do think that Google actually collects, like, where do you live, how old you are type information. But, you also don't want to just limit people down. But I do think, like, the default, on these things should be, what's in your area. So whenever you put in a search in Google or a search on Twitch, or, you start up Discord, man, there's a server right there, with somebody from your local area. Why not get together with these people and talk about what you all are interested in? Why not?
Well, I know what feedback I'm about to type into YouTube feedback. Sure.
What are your thoughts, Mino?
I forgot the question, I'll be honest. But just going off the energy that science just put out, I think, online, we talk about representation in the Black community, right? And a lot of people are always confused. Why do you guys need representation? Why do you guys need representation? When I was growing up, I never saw any scientists or none of that kind of stuff. The only reason I even got into science was because STEM was so pushed in my community. Oh, you have to go into STEM, you have to go into STEM. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't see any examples of people in that were looking like me. And oftentimes, you don't know if you don't know something exists or someone has done it before. Like, not everybody's a trailblazer. Some people are people like, I need to see an example first so I could follow the example. And I think when you see people out there that look like you could be like, okay, let me read up on how he got there, because maybe he came from the same kind of situation I'm growing up in. So I think it's very important. And talking about Black Caribbean content creators, I think that's important too, because me, I go on YouTube, I find Black content creators, I find Indian content creators, and all these other things, and I try my best to give them support because I know they're underrepresented and stuff like that. But I can't do that for Caribbean people because it's much harder to find them. We're a much smaller part of the population. So even what science suggested is great. But another thing, I think that's why I like Twitch, is that they allow you to tag your thing with, Caribbean, Black, whatever. So people who want to find that kind of content can actually find it without having to search a million different profiles and hope that they find it. So
To be unfair, Twitch just started doing that because they were trying to avoid heat for something else. But it's here now, so we can't, be anything about that.
But that's still a good thing though, because I feel like social pressure should trend towards positive outcomes, and I think, they weren't doing it initially for a good reason, but the outcome was still a good outcome, thankfully.
Yeah, and I feel like when I do see somebody from the Caribbean, it's almost like an automatic subscribe for the most part. And then I watch their content, I'm like, oh, maybe not. And then I take it away, but it's always initially support first and then see what they do. And then if I don't like it, I can always just leave it because it doesn't really bother you to be subscribed to somebody that's still supporting them. But the one thing I thought about thinking about this question, I'm thinking about STEM and thinking about Black people in STEM is growing up. If I had never gone to, let's say, high school, where I went to high school, I would never think that men could be teachers. Because in elementary school, I only had female teachers. The only males there was the janitor and the PE teacher. And PE is not really like a class per se. So like I was being taught by all women, so I never thought that men could actually be teachers until I got to middle school. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So I think even in that, we need to have representation everywhere across the board for our Black men to provide Black men with a pathway to thinking about their future. Because if they don't see any positive Black men in around them, why be positive? Why not just go do what everybody else is doing? I think the same can be said for content creators. So that's why I think it's important to have representation in content creation. Because when I started doing Twitch, I was like, that's strange. There's no Black people here at all. I first got onto Twitch because of Trihex and watched him do Mario, but then when I looked around, it's like I searched for Mario Maker and I don't see anybody Black doing it. And I don't know if it's just a bunch of like being overshadowed or there literally is nobody doing stuff like this, but I know there's thousands and millions of people on Twitch right now streaming. So I really do appreciate the tags that they put into place now.
So talking about, and I know we have to wrap up soon. By the way, we kind of started a little bit after our normal time, but Science, we want to be respectful of your time as well. Just let us know if you have to do a hard stop by a certain time, and we could shoot for that.
Yeah, I'll be comfortable with 3:20.
So then my last question, or maybe my penultimate question here is male role models. And have you guys had men in your life who kind of helped you realize what you wanted to be, or maybe model your ethics, your morals, or are there men? Have you guys had men in your lives? I know I grew up without a father figure, without a father. I shouldn't say father figure. I had many father figures, but I grew up without a father. I know maybe Wanted had a father in his house. I don't know about Science. So, but besides your father, were there other men who were able to influence your life?
Well, definitely my father was a big role model for me. In terms of public speaking, that's where I think I get it from, because a lot of people liked hearing him speak. Definitely doing his job, preaching, like that was his thing. He was also very good at debate, which I guess doesn't make sense. Funny story that I always heard about him was he was actually in this debate competition where the topic was the sun rises in the west, and he was actually the person who was opposing that topic, and he actually won that debate, and everybody says it was the most convincing win ever because he told me afterwards, after hearing many people reference it, he was like, I never argued that the sun rises in the east or that the sun rises in the west. The topic was that the sun rises in the east, right? Yeah, and he actually was opposing that. And he said that he never argued that the sun rises in the west, but just that what you call the place where the sun rises is variable. Like, why do we call it east? Why do we call it west?
Arbitrary.
So yeah. So, he was a big influence on me, definitely in the public speaking sense. Other than him, though, I can't say I had any other male role models. I had men in my life, my uncles on both sides, mother and father's brothers who have done amazing things, but was never really close to them. And like people who have made mistakes in their lives, who were also close to my family, but still at the same time really prominent in the community. I mean, but it was really hard to get men who would bring themselves forward and be like, I'm a role model. And I think, in the current world, like people don't really want to be role models. A lot of people think that cancel culture is like, this big thing that, like it's like arbitrarily because you're doing something that people don't like they cut you off completely out of the ecosystem, as opposed to saying that you really need to be held accountable for the things that we know that you have done that are not good for society. And so a lot of people, they don't want to be role models. I feel like, a lot of people say that, you meet your role models and you get disappointed, yada yada. Um, you know, Even in forensic science, it's a female dominated field. A lot of the people that I look up to are women. One of them just got an award the other day from the Royal Society of Scotland. Her name is Dr. Neem Nick Daid. She does really interesting work in forensic chemistry. I mean, you know, male role models had to come by. Can't say I've had any other than my father.
Same. I think my dad was my biggest role model and my biggest example of what a man should be, even though I kind of felt that there was possibly more, but again, there's a lot of different variables because I guess I have to look at where he came from and who was his role models and why is he doing the way he's doing it. So what he did teach me was that you should always be ready to learn something new. So like I said before on the podcast, he would tell me things before I needed to know them. So he would ask me questions about humanities, ask me English questions, ask me math questions. And as a kid, I didn't know what he was talking about. But as I went through academia, like high school, the questions would come in a different form, and I would already know to approach the question because you already gave it to me. So I appreciate that for the most part. Other male figures, not so much because it was a different time and a different ideal of what to get. So being the what do you call it, like the first generation to go to high school and college, I had no one to teach me how to do that, right? So like it was all, you know, new territory to me. But I did grow up watching Bill Nye the Science Guy a lot. So that was my introduction to science and Miss Frizzle, and those are people that actually got me interested in science. It was like more like characters on TV, even though Bill Nye is not really a character per se. But that was my introduction, and that was my goal to be somebody who was as smart as them or articulate as them, and that's what guided me, not so much somebody in my life.
Wanted, I think you should also talk about your background a little bit too, because right now our audience listening know that you work in public works, but they might not know that you actually have a background in science.
True. I took the science track in high school. I was valedictorian there. Then I went to UVI. I did a bachelor's in biology with a focus in microbiology because I was interested in it. And then I did a graduate program. I have a master's degree in environmental science, which I really, really, really like. And I never knew I would like it as much as I do. So I tried to find a job that was in that field. And the closest thing was a stormwater maintenance worker. So I felt, okay, stormwater, marine science, this should work. It's not. It's a lot of cutting grass and dealing with people. But then as I did my job, the people at work realized that, hey, he's good at computers. Put him in a sign shop where you can make the signs and install the signs and things like that. So my boss and I became close, and when he left, I could step into his position as the transportation coordinator. And then the other boss left, so I became superintendent of public works, basically. So now I'm in charge of public works. The goal is to not necessarily take a step down, but to build an idea that we had before. So back home in St. Croix and St. Thomas, we have the Department of natural resources. And I wanted to build that here. And the previous boss was like, that's a great idea. Let's do that because there's lots of lakes and wetlands around that we can study. But, it's hard to deal with upper management and pushing ideas forward and showing them the importance right now. So hopefully in the next few years, they can see, well, we probably need somebody here that can do studies on the water quality and on plant life and on the biology here. Isn't there somebody here that want to do that? And then they'll be like, oh, now you do it in hindsight. You start to build a lab and things like that. When they could have already done it 2 years ago, but that's neither here nor there.
No, I think it's very here and there. But so let me answer the question. So I didn't have a dad in my house, but I did have a lot of uncles. So my mom is one of 8. My grandma had 4 boys, 4 girls. Luckily, that's amazing. I want to do that one day, but maybe not 8, but equal amount of different. Anyway, I rambling. The point is, I had my uncles, and I used to look up to them a lot. I wanted to be in the military, for example, because all my uncles were in the military, either at one point or still are. And I thought that was very cool. I thought that was very manly. Like I a lot of times gauge what I thought was manly based on what my uncles did. I learned things like keeping your word, and if you say you can do something, you should do it. Stuff like that I learned from my uncles. But I also had other male role models throughout my life, like in high school and stuff. Like what Wanted to say, I met my first male teacher, and he taught me a lot of stuff, you know. And then when I went to college, I met another professor who I looked up to as well. Even though I never thought of them as mentors, I did take a lot from them. Like I tried my best to pay attention to what they were saying and what they told me. Even criticisms. I've always been a person who I enjoy criticisms as long as it's constructive. If you tell me, Fian, you can't be doing this, this doesn't look good, you have to do this or whatever, I'm not going to get upset. I think that's if it's a way for me to improve, then criticize. And I learned that from my male mentors, because I feel like men, we get criticized. When I was dealing with men, they were more rough with their approach of telling me something, and whereas women might try and do a gentle approach and might miss the mark, Fian, beat around the bush a little bit. Yeah. Whereas the male would tell me, Fian, what kind of dumb, so I think having those guys in my life kind of shaped me into being like, okay, yeah, I need to do this and that. This is the correct way to go about doing this and that. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, guys, this has been, again, it's always good to do this. It always feels like the right thing to be doing. And I guess one day, MK, we'll talk about our reasons for doing this and the future. But for now, I would like to sign off. So, Science, tell the world what you're doing right now and what your plans are for the short term.
Yeah, I'm Science. You guys could find me on Instagram, RAS_SCIENCE, RAS_Science on Instagram. And I go by my real name sometimes, Ciaran Philip. So you can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn, where I'm trying to really grow my network and get connected to the forensic science community here in Toronto, Canada. Really trying my best to, continue promoting STEM and letting, young people know that there are skills that will translate well across anything that you do once you develop them in STEM. Definitely in terms of, getting into the world of content creation, I think that there is scope for me there. People always say they like to hear me talk. So I'm going to try and do my best to, be doing more of that for myself in the future and hopefully monetize what I do. But for now, definitely find me on Instagram, RAS_SCIENCE. You could also search for my name on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I run a small consulting company called Sure Science Consulting, where I help people find accurate and reliable information so that they can make better decisions. So
links will be in the bio.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys. It's always cool to go down the rabbit hole and talk with you guys. Thanks a lot for being a good example, of how to run an operation like this.
We're always here if you need any help, any advice, just come. I'll help you out.
Yeah, and you already have a fan already, because I will listen to you talk all day for sure.
Yeah, for real.
I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Well, this has been the Rabbit Hole Roundtable Talks with Wanted and MK. We will see you in 2 weeks. We do not know for sure if we'll have a guest or not, because we're still trying to figure out what we're doing. But it will be him and I for sure. If there's any guests, it'll be a surprise and a pleasant one. So thanks for coming out, and we'll see you guys soon.
Peace.
Bye.